Here is the complete audio script for the Mansa Musa story. Who is the richest person in history? If you check the news today, you will see names like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, or Bernard Arnault. We marvel at their fortunes. We talk about net worths in the hundreds of billions. We track their stock prices like it's a sport. But if we look back through the centuries, if we adjust for inflation and really look at what wealth means, these modern billionaires are not at the top of the list. In fact, compared to the man we are talking about today, they are barely middle class. Imagine a level of wealth so vast that it is impossible to count. Imagine a man who didn't just have money in a bank, but who literally owned the source of the money itself. A man who sat on a throne of solid gold in a kingdom where gold dust was so common it was treated like dirt. But this isn't just a story about being rich. There have been many rich kings. This is a story about what happens when that kind of unlimited wealth collides with the real world. It is the story of a road trip that turned into an economic disaster. It is the story of a man who was so generous, so lavish, and so incredibly wealthy that he accidentally destroyed the economy of an entire continent just by passing through it. He is the only man in history to single-handedly cause a hyperinflation crisis just by buying souvenirs. And his story teaches us a fundamental lesson about money, that value is fragile, and even gold can become trash if there is too much of it. To understand how Musa broke the world economy, we first have to understand where he came from. In the 14th century, while Europe was struggling through the Middle Ages, fighting plagues and famines, West Africa was thriving. It was stable, it was organized, and above all, it was rich. But why was it rich? Geography. The Mali Empire sat perfectly between two critical resources. To the north, in the Sahara Desert, there were massive deposits of salt. In the medieval world, salt was life. It preserved food. It was essential for survival in the heat. It was worth its weight in silver. To the south, in the forests, lay the gold mines of Bambouk and Bouré. These mines were the secret engine of the medieval world. Historians estimate that in the 1300s, almost half of all the gold circulating in the Old World, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, came from these mines. And Mansa Musa owned it all. By the laws of the Mali Empire, any nugget of gold found in the ground belonged exclusively to the king. The common people could trade in gold dust, but the solid nuggets went to the emperor. This meant that Mansa Musa didn't just have a lot of money, he was the central bank. He controlled the supply of the world's most precious metal. In the year 1324, Musa had been ruling for about 12 years. He was a devout Muslim, and he decided it was time to fulfill one of the 5 pillars of Islam, the Hajj, the pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca. Now, for most people, a pilgrimage is a humble journey. You pack a bag, you travel with a small group, you pray. But Mansa Musa was not most people. He viewed this journey not just as a religious duty, but as a diplomatic mission. He wanted to show the world, specifically the Arab world to the east, that Mali was a great power. He wanted to put his empire on the map. He succeeded, but at a terrible price. He didn't just pack a bag, he packed a city. When Musa left his capital of Niani, he took with him a caravan that is almost impossible to visualize today. Historical records tell us he brought 60,000 men. Imagine a football stadium filled to capacity, all walking in a single line across the Sahara Desert. There were soldiers, heralds, scholars, and officials. There were 12,000 personal slaves, all dressed in fine Persian silk and brocade. Even the slaves wore outfits that would have cost a year's wages for a normal person. But the most shocking part was the luggage. Musa brought 80 camels, and on the back of each camel sat 300 pounds of gold dust. That is 24,000 pounds of gold. In today's money, that is hundreds of millions of dollars in raw cash, carried on the backs of animals. And that wasn't even the full treasury, that was just his spending money for the trip. This moving city marched across the desert. It was a logistical miracle. They had to feed 60,000 people and thousands of animals in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. But Musa had prepared well. His scouts went ahead, digging wells and arranging supplies. For months they walked, a river of humanity and gold flowing toward Egypt. And then, in July of 1324, they arrived in Cairo. Cairo was the biggest city in the region, the jewel of the Mamluk Sultanate. It was a sophisticated metropolis, a center of trade where merchants from Venice met merchants from India. The Sultan of Egypt, Al-Nasir Muhammad, was a powerful man. He was used to receiving foreign dignitaries, but he had never seen anything like this. The arrival of Mansa Musa in Cairo was a sensation. The people of Cairo lined the streets. They saw thousands of foreign soldiers, exotic animals, and slaves carrying staffs made of solid gold. It was a parade of unimaginable opulence. But there was tension immediately. Musa was a king, an emperor in his own right. He did not see himself as inferior to the Sultan of Egypt. When he was invited to the citadel to meet Sultan al-Nasir, the protocol demanded that he bow down and kiss the ground before the Sultan. The atmosphere in the throne room was electric. The guards gripped their weapons. For a moment, it looked like this diplomatic mission would turn into a war. Musa stood tall and said, "I make this journey for God, alone." He cleverly framed his refusal as religious devotion, not political arrogance. Finally, a compromise was reached. He bowed slightly, not to the Sultan, but to God. With the formalities out of the way, the real chaos began. Mansa Musa was generous, incredibly, dangerously generous. He gave gold to the Sultan. He gave gold to the officials. He gave gold to the poor. He handed out handfuls of gold dust to beggars on the street. But he didn't just give it away. He spent it. The merchants of Cairo, the shopkeepers, the jewelry makers, the textile sellers, thought they had won the lottery. Here was a man who didn't haggle. He bought everything. He bought Turkish slave girls. He bought Ethiopian singing girls. He bought rare fabrics from the East. He paid whatever price was asked. If a merchant said a robe cost 10 dinars, Musa gave him 20. The people of Cairo were ecstatic. Business was booming. Everyone was getting rich. Or at least they thought they were. This is where the story turns into an economics lesson. Musa had brought so much gold into Cairo and injected it so quickly into the economy that he broke the law of supply and demand. Gold, like anything else, is a commodity. Its value comes from its scarcity. If gold is rare, it is expensive. If gold is everywhere, it is cheap. Suddenly, every shopkeeper in Cairo had bags of gold. Every beggar had gold. The market was flooded. The value of the dinar, the gold currency of Egypt, plummeted. Because the money was worth less, prices skyrocketed. A loaf of bread that used to cost 1 copper coin now cost a silver coin. Clothing, food, rent, everything became 10 times more expensive. This is hyperinflation. The merchants who thought they were getting rich suddenly realized that their new piles of gold bought them less than their old piles of silver. The economy of Cairo crashed. The poor suffered the most, as the price of basic necessities rose faster than their wages. The rich saw their savings evaporate because the currency itself had lost its purchasing power. Historians estimate that Mansa Musa's visit devalued gold in the Middle East for over a decade. 12 years later, when visitors came to Cairo, the locals were still talking about the devastation caused by the Golden King. It took the Egyptian economy nearly a generation to recover from the inflation caused by one man's 3-month vacation. It is the only time in recorded history that one man directly controlled the price of gold in the Mediterranean. Usually, market forces dictate prices. In 1324, Mansa Musa dictated the market. But the story gets even stranger on the way back. After leaving Cairo, Musa continued to Mecca. He completed his pilgrimage, but the journey had been long, and the return trip was difficult. The caravan faced disease and exhaustion, and believe it or not, Mansa Musa ran out of money. He had spent so much in Cairo, given away so much in charity, and built so many mosques along the way, that the richest man in the world was cash poor. When he arrived back in Cairo on his return journey, he did something ironic. He had to borrow money. He went to the same merchants whose economy he had just crashed and borrowed gold at high interest rates to fund his trip home. This actually helped the Egyptian economy slightly. By taking some of the gold out of circulation, he helped stabilize the value of the currency he had destroyed. It was a one-man central bank correction. When Musa finally returned to Mali, he was changed. He didn't just bring back debt, he brought back talent. This is the part of his legacy that often gets overshadowed by the gold, but it is perhaps more important. He brought back architects, poets, and scholars from the Arab world. He brought back a famous Andalusian architect named Abu Ishaq al-Sahili. Legend has it that Musa paid him 200 kilograms of gold to design a new mosque in Timbuktu. This was the beginning of the golden age of Timbuktu. Under Musa's patronage, the city became a global center of learning. He built the Sankore University, which at its height had 25,000 students and one of the largest libraries in the world. While Europe was still largely illiterate, Timbuktu was producing manuscripts on astronomy, mathematics, law, and medicine. Books became the most valuable commodity in the city, more expensive even than gold. Musa had realized that true wealth wasn't just metal, it was knowledge. He transformed Mali from a resource-rich kingdom into an intellectual superpower. But there is a dark twist to this story, a consequence of Musa's journey that he never intended, and one that would eventually spell doom for West Africa. Musa wanted to put Mali on the map. He wanted the world to know his name. And he succeeded too well. In 1375, a few decades after Musa's death, a Jewish cartographer in Majorca named Abraham Cresques created the Catalan Atlas. It was the most important map of the medieval world. And right there, in the middle of West Africa, sat a figure. It was a drawing of a king wearing a golden crown, holding a golden scepter, and lifting up a massive nugget of gold. The caption read, "This black lord is called Musa Mali. So abundant is the gold which is found in his country that he is the richest and most noble king in all the land." This map was copied and studied all over Europe. Kings and merchants in Portugal, Spain, and Italy stared at the image of the man holding the gold nugget. They didn't see a center of learning. They didn't see a complex civilization. They saw a treasure chest waiting to be opened. That map, inspired by Musa's flashy pilgrimage, planted a seed of greed in the European mind. It drove the Portuguese to sail down the African coast in search of the River of Gold. It kicked off the age of exploration, which eventually led to the Atlantic slave trade and the colonization of the very empire Musa had built. In a tragic irony, the display of power that was meant to secure Mali's place in the world actually painted a target on its back. So, how do we judge Mansa Musa today? He is often cited as a fun trivia fact, the richest man ever. But he is more than that. He is a lesson in the complexity of economics. He proved that money is not the same thing as wealth. You can have all the gold in the world, but if you don't have a system to manage it, it can destroy you. He showed that generosity, if unchecked, can be as destructive as greed. He gave away so much that he impoverished the people he was trying to help, but he also left a legacy of culture that outlasted the gold. The University of Sankore still stands today in Timbuktu. The manuscripts are still there, surviving wars and rebellions. The gold is long gone, spent, stolen, or traded away, but the knowledge remains. In the end, Mansa Musa's journey was the ultimate display of what humanity can do. We can build empires that dazzle the sun. We can walk across deserts with cities on our backs. We can crash economies with a wave of a hand. And we can leave behind maps that change the course of history for better and for worse. The next time you hear about a billionaire buying a social media company or flying a rocket to space, remember the Lion of Mali. Remember the man who spent so much money he changed the temperature of the global economy. And remember